a very unusual halacha, which we find on Tisha B'Av, the night of Tisha B'Av, and the morning of Tisha B'Av until Chatzos. We're meant to stay in the Beit Knesset. We shouldn't have a Hesed Hadas. We have to concentrate on the Avelis. Now we have to take our minds off the Avelis. I don't think we find such a halacha elsewhere. Dafka on Tisha B'Av, not only we have to keep the halachos, but we shouldn't be Masiyach Das. We shouldn't take our minds off it for one moment. This year, I think we have a lot to remind us not to be Masiyach Das. A lot of assist. It's not just us sitting in the floor, putting on a pair of sandals. 3,500 missiles to remind us that we're in Golos. 64 soldiers and 3 civilians to remind us that we're in Golos. A turned over bus and a shot soldier to remind us that we're in Golos. A hostile foreign press and foreign governments to remind us we're in Golos. We don't need to be told not to be Masiyach Das. It's filling our minds, our beings, for the last kufa. I think that the situation bringing to forward is reminding us of a few things which are very basic and we all understand. I'd like to review them with you. First of all, obviously, it's Golos Yishmael. We're in the midst of Golos Yishmael. There are 4 Arba Golios: Babel, Paras, Yavan, Edom. Yishmael is not listed among them. It says Rockmill telling others that he's the last part of Golos Edom is Golos Ishmael. And that's what we're experiencing now. And in some ways he says it's stronger, it's worse than all the other Golios. He makes an unbelievable horror. To me it was unbelievable. The 4 Golios, the 4 other Golios are compared in the Sefer Daniel to Chayos Rois, to animals, wild animals. Yishmael, it says in the Torah, is Para Adam. He's a wild man. To the extent that they are Chayos, they present a threat to the Klal Yisrael, they take away our malchus, they subdue us. But Golos Yishmael is another bechina. It's from Para Adam. It's Adam Ebalim. And that's why in some ways it's worse. Let us remember. Let us remind ourselves that Yishmael is not like the other Umos. Yishmael also made a bris milah with Avraham Avinu. What is our koyach against Yishmael? I've heard it explained and we need to repeat it. Our koyach against Yishmael is not necessarily tefillah. Our kol Yaakov v'yadayim yedei Esav was said klapi Esav. That we have a koyach of tefillah, for sure we do. But Yishmael also davens to the same Rabbana Shalom. They call him a different name, but they mean that one God, and that's why they're holding on to the Temple Mount to guard it for us. So our koyach is not tefillah. What is our koyach? Our koyach is Torah. The Shloah explains they make a bris milah, we make a bris milah. But their circumcision is an external one. They just cut the orla. But we make a priya. We roll back the orla to megala the atara. That says the Swarma Kedoshim, that's called a bris pnimi. That's why ultimately they are able to ma'akev us a little bit before we come back to Eretz Yisrael, but we will ultimately be here. Our koyach in this country is the bris that leads to Torah. To the extent that we learn Torah, that's going to be our victory. Our victory lives in Torah and lives in nothing else. Not in the battlefield. Sure, we have to fight, but ultimately the koyach of that fight is going to be won. The Bate Midrashos throughout Klal Yisrael. We see today, I've heard it said, Tzvika Shletsky seemed to have said years ago, that the The Ishmaelites has a rankachat. They grabbed the koyach of Mesiras Nefesh. A perverted Mesiras Nefesh, but they've grabbed it. They're prepared to die for their cause. We've been dying for Kiddush Hashem since our inception. Avraham Avinu, where do we get the koyach to live and die for Kadosh Baruch Hu? Where do we have Asari Arugei Malchus? Where does that koyach come from? It comes from Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu says that went into the Kivshan Ha'esh. He was prepared to die for his Emunah. Says the Nefesh HaChaim, that's why every simple Jew, everyone throughout the ages has that koyach and the ability to ultimately make that final declaration. But it's a declaration of sanctifying God's name, not perversely killing and destroying. It's sanctifying, it's the sanctification of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But that l'chora, that perhaps is our test as we fight people who are exhibiting this in Mesiras Nefesh in our own lives. Unless we're asked to give up our lives like Rabbi Akiva, who on his death wanted to die in Kiddush Hashem, he said, this is I've been waiting for. As he said Shema his whole life, and now he was ready to do it. But short of that, perhaps the Kiddush Hashem that we have to make is in our koyach against them, which is the koyach of Torah. The first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of, that says the Ramban, that's connected Torah. That l'chora is our test. For those of us who learn Torah, those of us who shaykhs to Torah, Mesiras and Nefesh for Torah is that what is called for today. There's a famous machlekes, the machlekes, Rabbi Ishmael, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, right? Rabbi Ishmael said, Hanag behem minag derech eretz, you have to be involved with Torah, you have to be involved with derech eretz. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, Lo yamush Torah zemipicha, the Torah should never leave your mouth. Torah matialev, we work, we will never have time to learn. Harbe yasuk Rabbi Yishmael v'asal b'yadam. Many people did like Rabbi Yishmael and succeeded. Harbe yasuk Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, and they didn't succeed. The Meforshim all saying it's Revu and the Rambam. There's two Rambams. One Rambam says if anybody wants to dedicate himself to a Kadosh Baruch Hu can do so. But the Rambam in Hilchos Deis says first, the person should get himself a job, to get himself a field, get himself a wife. Teretz is, there's the hanhag of the Rabbim and there's the hanhag of the Yachid. The Rabbim are like Rabbi Yishmael, the Yachidim. The Yachidi school in all the generations have been Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. But we live in a different generation. In the last door, Baruch Hashem, there's Ribuy HaSafsalim. People have joined the Beis Medrash. It's become the norm. A grandson of Rabbi Yosef Chaim Zonenfeld, my neighbor, he should be well, said that when he was going out in Shidduchim, if a fellow was sitting and learning, the way he said it was as follows. Well, he's sitting and learning, but he also does so-and-so. He also does this, he also does that. He had to, for emphasis, he had to somehow explain what is he doing. Today is the opposite. It's the gaiva of everybody to marry a ben Torah. It's become the nachlas Rabbim. The Rabbim are in the Beis Medrash. But if the Rabbim are in the Beis Medrash, my dear friends, we have to understand that the Rabbim don't necessarily rise to the level of Mesiras Nefesh. Our ishtadlis, our efforts have to be to be that yachid. We have to be. Those of us who decided to follow the nachlas Rabbim have to become a yachid once again. The dedication of Rabbi Shimon Yochai, that's what it means to sit and learn full time. The Gemara says the inyan of Limud Torah is also why the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. The famous Gemara, Al Ma'av Da'aretz, Shalo Baruch B'Torah Techila. They didn't make a blessing in Torah Techila. Right? All Meforshim, right? The Psukim say, Mi ha'isha chacham v'yavin ezos asher diber pi Hashem elav yagida ma avda ha'aretz. Why was the land destroyed? Not to sakemidbar mebli over. V'yom Adonai al azvam es torasi. They left my Torah asher nasati lifnehem v'lo shamu b'koli v'lo holchu bo. Now they didn't go and learn Torah. So the Meforshim say, but they were learning Torah. That's why it had to be nizgala to them, that it was only because HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to tell them, because lo hochel be what's they wouldn't make a bracha in Torah Techila. Say to Meforshim, what does that mean? They were learning it, but they weren't learning it totally l'shma. They were learning it like as another subject, for a purpose. Perhaps some want to say because they wanted to have batei dinim, needed Torah to be in order to enforce the din. It wasn't totally l'shma. It wasn't recognizable, therefore, that they weren't learning Torah. Ultimately, we have to understand that learning Torah is another subject. It's not another subject. Ki heim chayenu v'yorach yameinu. And that has to be nikkur in all of our lives. It has to be a nikkur in our lives of those who are going to the Beis Medrash, and it has to be nikkur in the lives of those who aren't going to the Beis Medrash, because this is the essence of who we are. And listen what the pasuk says afterwards. They didn't learn lo hochu v'lo al azmas torasi asher nasati lifneihem lo shamu b'koli lo hochu ba v'yechu acharei shrirus libam. They went after the desires of their hearts. V'acharei haba'alim asher limdu ma'avosam. Reminds me of the psukim. Psukim say when we were given the bris. Maybe there's somebody today whose heart is differing from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's going to want to serve foreign gods. A person's going to hear the HaKadosh Baruch Hu's demand to keep the Torah. Or Shalom Yiyali. It's going to be good for me. I'm going to go after my own heart. The Ramban says to go full blast. Taiviz, bli ein sof. Lo yaveh Hashem slach lo. HaKadosh Baruch Hu won't forgive that person. It seems in the pasuk here that if we decided that we didn't want to learn Torah, lo baruch b'Torah techila. What did they do? They went after shrirus libam. Shrirus lima means, says the Ramban in this psukim in Chumash, it means taiva, without any bound. The Baalim, Baal Peor. What is the Baalim? Baal Peor. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz teaches that Baal Peor means to worship oneself, ultimate hefkeris. The way one serves Baal Peor is by defecating on the aisle. It makes no sense. Says Reb Chaim, that's the ultimate sense. I'm in charge. I can do what I want. It's the hefkeris. If that's not the challenge of our generation, shrirus libui, unbridled taiva Rahman al-San, Baal Peor, everything is mutter, whatever a mensch wants. But what does that mean? The challenge is to go back. They didn't make it lo baruch b'Torah techila. They didn't make a bracha on Torah Tchila. That's where it lies. The essence, the chashivas of Torah. We're all learning, but what drives us? What's important to us? What's really meaningful in our lives? This leads us to the second big hisaros, I believe, that we can have. We have Golos Yishmael, and we are seeing the sina of the Umos HaOlam, the foreign press, foreign governments making statements, lo yuman. You wouldn't believe the things you're reading, you're hearing. They actually said that. They actually think like that. Can't they? Don't they know? Habal lahargaka, hashkin laharga, a pasha svara. Someone comes to kill you, you get up to kill him. There's such a thing as self-defense in this world. But you see the sina, the Arhabal sina, the way they're looking at things. Where does that come from? It says, Har Sinai, Yardu Sinai Lumos Olam. Har Sinai gave the hatred for the 8 nations of the world for the Jewish people. From their perspective, someone once made the following ha'orah. It's a very nice ha'orah. It says in the Gemara and Avodah Zarah, at the end of days, the Umos HaOlam are going to come, and Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to come with a Sefer Torah, and he's going to come out and he's going to say, who wants Char Torah? Who wants the reward for Torah? And all the Umos HaOlam are going to come out. Yebarvuvia, says the Gemara, Rome, Edom, Ishmael, all the Umos are going to come. They're going to clamoring to get Char Torah. And essentially what the Gemara says is, they come
they said, well, what did you do for the Yidden? He says, well, I made shvakim, I made marketplaces, and I made bridges, and I made a place for the Yidden to work and to do their thing. Tipshin, you did it for yourself. That's the Gemara. Famous piece of Gemara. You did it for yourself. You didn't do it for the Yidden. You know what? Bizman hazeh, they're going to get out when Kodesh Baruch Hu, when the final curtain call comes, Chevra, and everyone's going to want Schar Torah. They're going to bring out the UN, where they speak Narishkeit, and they're going to just show all the quotes. Did you say that? Did you say that? Did you walk out on that vote? Did you vote like this? It's going to be plain and push it. It's a biro she'ein kamohu. They're showing their stripes. They're showing their stripes, and it's going to be very clear. And they're going to walk out. They won't even have a taina, we did it for Yidden. They voted against us. They said horrible things that make no sense, even in their lexicon. But that's their problem. Then they have to deal with themselves. But what about us? At the challenge of Sinai, why yard is Sinai l'umos olam? What does that mean? I understand it plain and pashut. We ruined the party. You know that guy who ruins the party? You know, the party pooper, and everybody knows the song. We're not supposed to sing it, right? Party pooper. We ruined the party. There's meaning in the world. Hitler yamach shemo zichro. We're the conscience of the world. Whether Kodesh Baruch Hu offered the Torah for the Umos Olam, Avadi offered it to them, but they said makasa, but they weren't ready for it. But the fact that we took it, that still ruined the party, because that means there's meaning. There's something important, there's something going on here. It's not one big merry-go-round. It's a Kodesh Baruch Hu's world. We stand for that. And in the inner recesses of their soul, it's not just Esav Sones Yaakov, but that means that we have to live up to the challenge of Sinai. Let's remind ourselves, from our dear Rosh Yeshivas Exile, Reb Mendel Weinbach said on this podium, it's really a Sfas Emes Betzim. When Klal Yisrael was offered the Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, take the Torah, or sham tiek v'raschem, or there will be your burial. There's another alternative. Let's go and be like everybody else. There's a third alternative. Either accept the Torah, you're buried, or we can be like Paraguay. Let's just, kukaracha a bissel. No, that wasn't given us as an alternative. My dear friends, that's not an alternative. Because we saw the emes at Sinai, and Kodesh Baruch Hu was Megala, Ein Od Milvado. We saw it with our eyes, we heard it with our ears. The emes of the Torah, the emes of the Kodesh Baruch Hu, that's no longer an option. We accepted the bris. That's our tafkid in this world. So Enochanami, they hate us, and that's their problem. But that's really not what we have to be concerned about. We have to be concerned about that we have to live up to the reason why they hate us. We have to live up to Sinai. We have to live up to that challenge of Sinai. We're in Bein HaMetzarim, and Bein HaMetzarim means between the boundaries are the boundaries of this Welt, of Olam Hazeh, which are caving in on us. Every year at this time, they cave in. All the curses cave in on us, because it's Olam Hazeh without a Kodesh Baruch Hu. When we veer away from our tafkid, then Olam Hazeh comes on us. But that's not our tafkid. Our tafkid is not to be just another member of the United Nations. We're supposed to be that nation that accepted the Torah, and that their sinner will become awe in the end of days. There's another nakuda which I think is pervasive in the tekufa we're living in, and dafka during the time of Tisha B'Av. It's called Midas Adin Metuach. The Midas Adin is stretched out. We started before, we said you can't be Masiach Das. That means that we're supposed to look at the Avelis of Tisha B'Av and not look away. Now, we don't like that. Nobody likes that. Din is very frightening, and it hurts. But the Chazal said, look at it straight in the eye. Do not take your mind off of it. And the entire matzav that we're living in today with the war is midas adin matuach, Jewish blood being spilt. 64, these young men, these are young Jewish boys. These are young Jewish boys that could be doing tshuva in this yeshiva. Let's remember that. They're our brethren. That's Jewish dam spilt to protect us. Because there's a midas adin metuach, there's a midas adin that's over us, and it hasn't gone away. But we don't like the din, but we have to look at it straight in the eye. Because when we look at it straight in the eye, that's where it's going to come to Yeshua. Kanareh, Chazal understood that when we look at it straight in the eye, when you look at the din, then you can grow. If you see the Chorban head on, you can grow. I saw a Moradika mashal, an unbelievable mashal from Rav Schwab Marchi Lev. He says a Moradika mashal. He says like this. Imagine, Rahman al-Islam, sometimes you have yasomim, orphans. And, the kid's a little kid, and they don't know whether to tell him what happened to his parents or his father. They don't know. They tell him, they don't tell him. It's a whole deal, right? How are you supposed to break the news and what happened, etc. But imagine, he says, imagine if a person's a yosem and the father's dead, but you know what? You could tell the yosem, he's dead, but you can do tchiyas amesim on him. You can bring him right back. I have a way that you can make tchiyas amesim. You can bring him back to life. Would you tell him? Versteht you tell him. You tell him everything. Because he's got the keys to bring him back to life. That's what Tisha B'Av means. It's true. The Beis HaMikdash has been destroyed. It's true we're living in Gullus. It's true we're sitting on the floor. It's true they're shooting bullets at us. It's true there's sinas ha'olam. But you know what? Ultimately, we can bring it back. We always talk about every generation, every year that's not built, it's as if we destroyed it, which is it's the truth, but it's a negative statement. He emphasizes, you know what that means? That we can build it. Can you imagine if I came out and I said, okay, Chaver, I got a building project. I have a building project. We're going to build the Beis HaMikdash. See, you look at me like I'm crazy. Or maybe I'm the Mashiach that everybody's been talking about for the last couple of weeks, right? No. Torah says we can build it. We can build it. We can't get yush. We can't give up because year after year we have to meet each other and have these gatherings. And we have to go through a Tisha B'Av. Fakir it. We have to understand that is our tafkid. Our tafkid is to rebuild it. And you know how we're going to rebuild it? All the Meforshim say. The fact that we're mourning over the Beis HaMikdash shows that it's alive and well. It says by Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu didn't receive Tanchumim for Yosef all the time. He was never consoled. Say Chazal, why? Because when a person, God forbid, dies, there's a bracha, Kodesh Baruch Hu has it that it goes away from a person's mind. But Yosef never died. So therefore, Yaakov Avinu never was consoled. We have never been consoled about the Beis HaMikdash. We're still talking about it today. It's on our minds. It's in our hearts. Because it really hasn't gone away. Oh, for sure. If you go over there, you're going to see a mosque. And over sure, if you talk about the inner Beis HaMikdash, which all of us contain, as the Nefesh HaChaim explains, our deeds, our speech, and our mind all correspond to ruchniistic levels, and ultimately our minds, our thoughts are like the Kodesh Kedoshim. So for sure we have our own inner Beis HaMikdash, and unfortunately, it's because it's not filled with the kalim as it's supposed to be, and maybe it's logged up a little bit of spiritual grime and grease that it's not functioning. But remember, the Meforshim all say, he speaks about it. Yeah, it says the Greeks said to us, Kisval Karen Ashosh Einlechem Chelek Elokei Yisrael, right on the horn of an ox that you do not have a portion in the land, in the God of Israel. Says the Maral, why? Because when we sinned, right away, on the inception of the Jewish people, we made the golden calf, the Egel Azav. So the Yevonim said, what's straight near a cup? You think you have you're connected with the Kodesh Baruch Hu? Right at the chuppah, it's the Gemara we just learned. Right at the chuppah, your mamish went away. During the chuppah. So you're timing to me that you have a chelek Elokei Yisrael? Right, the kisvei ashur, right on the horn of an ox. A karen ashur she'en lechem chelek Elokei Yisrael. The timing. The inception of our nationhood, we sinned. Says the Maral, but you know what? There's two relationships. There's a father and a son, and there's uber yerech imo, or uber is the fetus, is like the thigh of its mother. And a chanami, we can veer away from a Kadosh Baruch Hu on one level. A son can turn away from his father. A son can rebel against his father. But ultimately, Uba Yerachimo, we never really went away. On a certain deeper level, we're tzugabun, we're together with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and that's never going to break. That's the bris that's never going to go away. That's a kesher deep in our souls, all of us. As much as we filled ourselves up with who knows what, right down deep, we're still connected. And that's why we can all rebuild it. We can rebuild it within ourselves, and we can rebuild it out there. Because it never really goes away. It goes away before. But the potential to bring it out is right within us. Right there, right now. In all of us. Our own Beis HaMikdash, our own little inner spiritual world can be rebuilt. Because we never really fully disconnected. And the same thing is true of the Beis HaMikdash, the Klal Yisrael. We don't like the din. Nobody likes to look at din. But we got to remember another thing about the din. The din is our survival. As the Chazal tell us, right, the Kodesh Baruch Hu punishes us as time goes on because that gives us the schus kiyum to continue. As opposed to the Umos Olam, he lets them play out their schuyos and then bang, he wipes them off the stage of the world. So the fact that we do suffer means that Kodesh Baruch Hu wants us to survive and he wants us to succeed. So by looking at the din, we see the victory. That's the pshat why we got up and sat on our chairs. A Kodesh Baruch Hu, why? Because that's when the Beis HaMikdash started to burn. So we said a Kodesh Baruch Hu took out his wrath on Eitzim v'Avanim. He took out his wrath on stones and wood. That's not very nice, but it's better than destroying us. That means that we, as a nation, go forward. We're missing a key element of who we are and what we need, for sure. But we're still going. Tisha B'Av means that in the din we're being punished, but that is ultimately our tikkun. The first machlokes in the world, it's interesting, there's an interesting chazal. Kain v'Hevel. You know what Kain said? Leis dayan v'leis din. There's no din, there's no din, there's no din, and there's no dayan. And Hevel said there is. There's a judgment. Judgment means that there's meaning. There's consequences. There's tikkun olam. So we have to recognize them. We don't want to face it, but this is the day to face it. But by facing it and seeing that ultimately it comes from Ava, as you all know, the famous Chazal, that when the Kodesh Baruch Hu destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, the Kruvim were facing one another. They were facing one another. Unbelievable. That means that was an act of Ava. Unbelievable to the father. But you know what? As a person who was born before the flood, I'm a dinosaur. Before the flood, when my father, he used to hit. I used to get hit as a kid. They used to do that, such a thing. There was hitting children. I didn't understand at the time, but now do I thank him? Of course. He knocked a little sense into me. He should have done a little more. Have more sense. But you know what? Tochacha is not so easy. We learned that from last week's Parsha. Parsha's Devarim, which is always the lead on for Tisha B'Av. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu waited. He waited before he was about to die, before he gave Tochacha to the Klal Yisrael. Say Chazal, Rashi brings it. He learned from Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu did the same thing. Why? Yaakov Avinu didn't want to give Tochacha. Say Chazal. He was afraid if he would have given Tochacha to Ruvain while he was younger, Ruvain would have gone to Esav. He would have gone to Esav. That's an unbelievable thing. That means he would have rebelled to the point where he would have left Yaakov Avinu and gone with, he would have gone off the derech, as they say. He would have lost it completely. Because Tochacha. Enochanami. Tochacha is a very difficult thing. It's a difficult thing to receive, and we want to run away. We want to rebel. Why can't you be nice to us? But we need this. We have to be the opposite. It's a oheves tochachas. We don't like it. But ultimately, that's what makes us into Klal Yisrael. That's what's going to correct us. That's going to bring us back to where we need to be. Otherwise, we're just going to be in that silly merry-go-round. I like to talk about those balloons. In the presidential nomination, the president is a chashuv guy. He's supposed to be a chashuv guy, right? Bingo, he's elected. What did he do? When they put out 1,000 balloons. However, this is not gun. I send my kids the gun, the 3-year-olds. They play with balloons. Grown people with their balloons. Oh, yeah, let's have a good time with the balloons. 10, 9, 8, yeah, then bingo! We'll all get drunk. That's not what it's all about, my dear friends. But we know better. But facing the din, my dear friends, we see that facing the din, that's where the Yeshua is going to come from. But we don't like it. It's Metuach Adin, and Be'ezer Hashem, Chodesh Baruch Hu should have mercy. But there's another thing we have to recognize here. We said it in our program, and I just want to repeat it. You have to, if we don't open our eyes to this, we're blind. There are 3,500 rockets were sent against Israel. 3,500 rockets. Approximately 500 were taking care of the Iron Dome. As one of my students said to me, Israel's a small country. 3,500 rockets. So the Iron Dome is a nice nister. But what about the other 3,000? So they went to open areas. Chevra, if you were fighting a war and you're fighting a gun and you're getting it wrong, wouldn't you adjust it? That's what I would do. I'd say, okay, we missed this time, move it around. Adjust it a little. 3,500 rockets. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is protecting us. And Achanami, there's Jewish blood. It's horrible blood being spilled. And we are suffering. And every person that is injured or dies is a loss for all of us. It's a tragedy. But we got to think about how it's being done with an Ava also. To the extent that when they ring those buzzers, we don't even take it seriously. But you know what? For those of you who listen to radio, I'm not advocating it, but if you listen to the radio, whenever they have a azakah, the siren, so then they announce the city. Kiryat Shmona, azakah, right? Right? Beitar, azakah, right? And then you hear it. Now, no one's taking it seriously because Baruch Hu, he's protecting us. But you know what it means? So if it's not to run into your rooms, what is it? It's a national shofar blast. This year we've had national shofar blast. It's on the radio, it's in the streets. Baruch Hashem, the threat has not manifested itself. But take the shofar. The Gans Klal Yisrael is hearing shofar. It's waking us up. My dear friends, waking us up as a nation. There's one last point I'd like to speak about, which I think that this whole Tekufa has brought out. We know that this whole Maisa, this Milchama, really was precipitated, at least if you look at it Al Pi Teva, was the unfortunate abduction of those 3 teenagers and their Ritzicha, their murder. And then it just started like it was a snowball. There was a tremendous achdus in Klal Yisrael when those boys were taken. Everyone was davening. Everyone felt that that's our tzara. Now, when we're facing a milchama, right? Gadol hasaras hatabas, greater is the removal of the ring. When Achashverosh took off his ring, it was greater than 48 Nevi'im. When we're threatened, my dear friends, it brings us to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. But it's also bringing us to a feeling of unity. And I think if we even think back, it starts with all the social issues that have been facing us this year, which brought to a convocation of 600,000 people or more on the streets, singing Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. We're feeling a little bit what it means to have an achdus. The achdus is being pushed on us. Unfortunately, it's being pushed on us from an external circumstance. But we're starting to feel what it means to take down the barriers from one another. One of the reason that's given for the second base of Mikdash being destroyed is Sinas Chinam. Kamsa bar Kamsa. Right? They all ask a kasha. Right? What happened? He invited Kamsa to the wedding, and Bar Kamsa came. So the kasha is, and then Bar Kamsa had a big taina and had gotten into a fight with the person who made the wedding, whose name remains unnamed. And then Bar Kamsa goes and is malshing to the Romans, and that's the whole story of how the Churban happened. But the kasha is, Kamsa, the man who was supposed to get invited, never showed up. And it says, Kamsa Bar Kamsa nechrav Yerushalayim. Yeah, it's a famous kasha. And the Maral answers it, many people take his approach. That Kanareh, Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, Kamsa was friendly with the Mazmin, he was friendly with the one who invited, but it wasn't Stammer friendship. It was kind of like cliques. These are people, they belong to different groups. He was also part of it. When you make friendship as a way of opposing somebody else, that's not the proper type of friendship. When we cling together to be in this group as opposed to that group, that's not the proper type of friendship. That's not real Akdus. That's not the Akdus that's going to bring Klal Yisrael to the Gula. So Kamsa, in a certain sense, is also part of the problem. His love for the Mazmin was not out of pure Ava. It was also a negative feeling, perhaps for Bar Kamsa or whatever. It was part of some sort of political situation, social situation. But now we are experiencing that feeling of Achdus. When we don't look at each other as enemies, we look at it, we know that we're all together. Those missiles do not make a distinction of what type of Jew we are. They don't look at the color of the kippah on our heads. They don't look at how we said Psukah de Zimra. Don't look at anything. 3,000 missiles are being shot at us. You know, years ago, one of the rabbis, I won't mention his name, who was an American rabbi at the time, came at the time of the first Gulf War. And he came to be Mizdai. He wanted to identify with everybody here during the Gulf War. And he was talking when we had at that time they had the Patriots and all that. So as they were throwing the missiles, he says, "Saddam, don't you know I'm a nice American Jew? I'm a good guy. What are you throwing at me? What do you got against me?" Teretz says they don't make distinctions. The Gumos Olam don't make a distinction, and we have to stop making distinctions. For sure, we differ. For sure, we're not all thinking the same, be it in a religious community or in a non-religious community. And for sure, there are real issues which we can't just put underneath the rug. But the Sina, we can get away with. We don't have to have the Sina. We don't need Sina. You can argue about issues. That's what Meir's wife told him. It says, don't get rid of the chotim chatoim, the sins. We have differences. Today, do we look at each other when we hear about boys going to war, we're worried about, we're all together. We went out on that street. Remember when we went out on that street and we declared Klal Yisrael declared Shema Yisrael. If you recall at the end, they took turns. First there was a Hasidic Rav, then there was an Ashkenazi, and then there was a Sfadi. I don't know who they were, but the last one we did Slichot. We did Slichas. And he did it in Nusach the way the Sfadim do it. And he was Melamed, he was teaching us how to do the Slichas. He was teaching us how to do Slichos. What's the Mashiach going to have to do if it's not teach us all how to join in prayer? Join in prayer is one. Not necessarily change our nusach, but to join in prayer is one. Together, all people together, feeling that unity and being with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what destroyed the Beis HaMikdash was the Sinas Chinam, and the way to bring it back is Avas Chinam. So we have to transfer this feeling of Achdus, which we have. It's a negative Achdus because we have an enemy. But we have to take that and carry it over to when this thing goes away, God willing, to the public discourse. That it's true we differ, but let's take the tone down. Let's talk about the inyanim, and let's not talk about personalities, etc. And I think that we know that the real shalom, it says, Reb Mendel used to say also, Osei shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom. The true shalom is the Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to make shalom. How did he make shalom? Osei shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom. What was that said? It was said by Makkah's Barad. It was said on the Makkah of the, what's it called? The hail. The hail was fire and water. He made shalom between the Malach Gavriel and the Malach Mechoyel. Gavriel is the Malach of Eish, and Mechoyel is the Malach of water. However, for those of you who graduate second grade, fire and water, Mishnish. It doesn't go together. And if you don't have to try it, but that's just the way it is, right? But a Barad, it went together. They did hefech. They did the hefech of the teva. They did the opposite of what they were created for. Gavriel is the Malach Eish. Malach Hamayim, they don't shtim. Osei Shalom, but for Kadosh Baruch Hu, they went together. How do we achieve true Shalom? How are you going to have true Avos Chinam? What's going to reduce the sinah we have for the people who are different from us? When we start to reintroduce the Kadosh Baruch Hu into our lives, what was the ma'ached of the Jewish people? Was the Beis HaMikdash. Just think about it for a moment. If you had a mikdash, all of a sudden everyone's together. What made us together? Teretz says, a Kadosh Baruch Hu made us together. When the Kadosh Baruch Hu's in this world, we have something higher. We go above who we are. When we relate to something higher, then we can have true Achdus. Then we can have true Shalom. Osei shalom b'mamav. Even fire and water can get together. People who are complete opposites can find a way to cooperate. But that's not just compromise. It's something higher. And my dear friends, that's what we have to take out of the Tisha B'Av. The Tisha B'Av means we're missing Mikdash. What do it mean? We're missing Shechina. We're missing a Kadosh Baruch Hu. We started out speaking about the fact that we have to have a little bit more Mesiras Nefesh for who we are as Jews. That means living with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. For sure, there's some people who can spend all their time in the base medrash, but what about those who cannot and have to go to work and encounter the world? There's a Kadosh Baruch Hu out there. There's a Kadosh Baruch Hu out there in our homes. Is he in I wanted to bring along, the 20 leaflets I got this week. And this is Tisha B'Av week. Leaflets to buy. Clever, the buy. Everything and anything and everything and everything and everything. Is that where Kadosh Baruch Hu is? Well, what you need, you should buy. But beyond that, it gets a little over the top. We have to bring Hashem into our lives, my dear friends. I'm talking to myself, I'm talking to all of us. To the extent that we can take a little bit of the adversity that we're experiencing and translate it into a Bissel Mer Shalom, a Bissel Mer Achdus, a little bit more of a feeling that we're all in this together, that there's a Klal Yisrael in the world, that we have a Tafkid. And Taka, we don't have John Smith down the block. He's Taka not my friend. Taka lives a different life from me. He doesn't care what's going on over here. And if anything, has seen it for us. He's not our Geschäft. Our Geschäft is each other. Our Geschäft is to promote a Kadosh Baruch Hu in this world. And unlike those fanatics and their craven desire for Dam, what they do, we will consecrate a Kadosh Baruch Hu's name, but it will consecrate a Kadosh Baruch Hu. We mekadosh Shem Shemayim. When we do that, when our little deeds and our bigger ones, then my friends, Be'ez Hashem will gather next year or even tomorrow for the B'yas HaMashiach.